Start,
Anthony-
guys. I was like, hey. I didn't mean to
just started
silence the room.
Okay, is this my job? Oh, okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. This is the call to order for the Budget and Finance Committee of the Cooperative Services Computer Services Board. It is Friday, March 22nd, 2024 at 10:06 a.m. Can we have a roll call, please?
Austin,
Present.
DiDonato. Jim, sorry.
Sorry, here.
Dombrowski,
Here.
Jacobson,
Here.
Jakacki,
Here.
and Todd.
Hello.
For CCS, we have Rebecca Malinowski, Deborah Wishmeyer, and Beth Stonebrenner.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Do we have any additions to the agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the review and approval of the minutes of our March 28th, 2023 Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Are there any comments or a motion?
I move to approve the minutes, Dombrowski.
Any second? This
I'll
is
second.
Austin. I will second.
Anthony seconds.
Okay, any comment? No comments? Okay. Roll call, please.
Austin,
Yes.
DiDonato,
Yes.
Dombrowski,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Jakacki,
Yes.
Todd.
Great, we have minutes. Thank you. All right, so the subject of today's meeting is the review of the draft fiscal year 24-25 budget plan, and I'm going to turn this over to Rebecca.
Thank you. So I sent via email the first draft of our budget, and I noted in the email that there were several areas that still need work. So this isn't final. I'll go ahead and so just for ease, I color coded the tabs based on kind of what % done they are. So anything that's in red hasn't really been addressed at all. Things that are in this kind of yellow orangey, like there's maybe some refining that needs to happen. And then the green mostly just needs like a second run through or second or third run through and some minor adjustments. So as part of this process, we look at our projections for the rest of the fiscal year. And we are, as Anthony alluded to at the governing board, we're trending to come in under budget this year. So although we didn't plan a transfer to the development fund, I think there will be one to recommend at our next meeting. We're coming in under budget largely due to personnel vacancies, with a staff member that resigned. That's the position is still in the process of being filled, and then a staff member on leave that we won't be refilling that position. That budget line is coming in under. And then kind of on the opposite end of that, you'll see professional contractual is over budget due to the approved spend to get additional IT support. So I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions about the projections. Again, there's a few things in here that maybe need some tweaks. I'm still waiting on the final quote for one of the servers we're replacing this year. So that capital number could vary a little bit, but it's not going to be over budget. Any questions on the projections? Okay. In terms of the budget for next year, it's pretty straightforward. I want to come back to personnel. I think this is kind of our perennial question at this meeting is what should we budget for staff increases for next year? So I want to come back to that. When we're looking at professional contractual, we are going to, as a next agenda item or future agenda item, going to talk about the audit. You can see that we came in over budget, or we're projected to come in over budget on the audit due to changes in GASB that are requiring additional reporting. We're also just due for an audit review. So we'll look at that. IT managed services, you'll see here. And then we've added a few security components to our maintenance agreements. So that's an increase. I have to double check with our IT service. I don't think we need this, but we had reduced CAM and real estate tax this past year because we were in rent abatement. So that is a rather significant looking increase. But if we go back further years, it's less than, with rent, it's less than we had been paying before. So one thing that is pretty exciting is we're not planning any large capital purchases next year. We have a few on deck for this year that we're still finishing up. And again, I'm working with OSG to finalize the pricing on that last server. But in terms of hardware replacement, we don't really have anything coming up for next year. Electronic resources looks like a larger budget, like a larger increase, but that's related to our new libraries that are coming in. So those costs are additional licenses. And then that leaves our biggies of the ILS and personnel from operating. So before we get into those, I'll pause for any questions, concerns. Right. Again, in the ILS line, we'll see what looks like a 5% increase, but we have our standard 2.5% uplift, and then the additional cost of Warren Newport licenses. This sort of very odd looking table down here essentially just is breaking down year one licenses. So when we bring in a new library, they're responsible to pay the full cost of their first year of licenses. And just the way that our subscription works out and when the libraries come on board, that tends to be split between fiscal years and invoices. So this is just like my worksheet for what the incoming library is going to pay, and then what CCS is going to pay. So they cover year one, and then after that 12-month mark, it's just wrapped into everyone else's. So the things that say bill to library here are not added into this line. They're going to end up in the pass-through line. As you can see, our contract ends in April of 2026. So we will be, one of our big projects for next year is going to be an evaluation of tools and likely a renewal process. So initial discussions with long range planning, we're going to kind of spend the first 3 to 6 months of the fiscal year reviewing in-market products and confirming that we do in fact want to renew with Polaris. And then we will move into negotiations to have the contract wrapped up by the time of our renewal. That will include looking at discovery layers. So we will be looking again at PowerPack and Vega and BiblioCommons and Aspen. Folio's knocking on our door as well. We may or may not include them in our analysis. To my knowledge, they still don't have any public library customers. So these numbers are set for next year and most of the following, but then we'll be looking at, again, new negotiations. And these notes are old. So in personnel, we, as you can see, are trending to come in under budget this year due to those vacancies, for both salary and then related lines. For next year's budget, we have, as a placeholder for today's discussion, a 4.5% increase to staff salaries. So as you can see, it's not a 4.5% increase to the line because it's looking at the positions that we were planning for next year as opposed to what we had planned for at the start of the year. So that is higher than CPI. Also, I would say that our staff, with the kind of changes in organization and moving to managed services for IT, some of those responsibilities are being redistributed to staff as well. So from my perspective, I feel like a higher than CPI increase, planning for a higher than CPI increase pending, again, evaluations of everyone would be reasonable. But I'd love to hear what you're working on at your libraries, any discussion in this area.
Refresh my memory, Rebecca. Do you guys normally do individualized merit increases along with a CPI, or does everyone get basically the same percentage increase, whatever's decided?
Roughly everyone gets the same. We do, we split the increase. So like half of it everybody gets, and then the other half is based on performance. But in general, folks, I'm going to amend that statement in a minute, but in general, people shake out to be pretty much the same. We have made some adjustments for benchmarking. So when we brought a recent staff member in, we brought them in under the midpoint of the position, and we've been bumping them up at kind of a higher rate to resolve that. And then moving forward, our revised practice after working with HR Source is to target bringing people in at the midpoint of the range, assuming they meet all qualifications for the position for their recommendation. So there have been some adjustments that look different because of that.
Yeah. I would argue if you bring people in at the midpoint, then you're not able to use half of your pay scale. Not bring them in at the bottom. What we did was we created one, it's at the midpoint between the bottom and the midpoint, like 10% or 20% in between or whatever. That's what we hire at, and then they go. But that's just me. We are, to answer your initial question, we're going to shoot for right around a 4% across the board increase for our staff. So that's CPI plus 0.5%. It might be 4.25, it might be 3.75, something around there. And we used to do CPI plus like a 1 or 2% merit pool possibility, but just kind of found out during the last couple of years where inflation was so high we weren't doing merit. It's just easier, and it relieves stress on the managers and us to go, well, and you know, 0.25% or 0.5% is maybe 25 cents an hour or something like
Right,
that.
it's
And it's
fairly
just not a lot.
negligible.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's just easier to
agree.
just go, everyone's getting this.
We're doing a 5% increase to our budget line. But part of that's because we're looking to create a new position potentially, so that's not all going into, so that's, you're asking, so they're asking two questions, like salary line. You're looking for a 4.5% increase to your salary line, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna do 4.5 increase to your staff, is that right?
We're actually decreasing our salary line. Our salary
Oh.
line will decrease by 6%.
Right, that's a good point. So decrease by 6%. But all the people you have together, plus a new position, let's say you hire them at midpoint, are you asking for a 5% increase from that amount? Do you know what I'm saying?
4.5.
4.5, okay, 4.5%. So
Yeah.
we're looking at 5% increase because we're creating a new position, but staff are looking at about a 4% increase potentially.
Mhm.
We do all merit increase ourselves, but we don't need to go into that. Though this last year of minimum wage, though you don't have to deal with minimum wage because you don't have any
Correct.
minimum employees, but so a lot of our staff are getting, a 7.5% increase, but they're on lower in the pay grade.
Mhm.
I see this as an opportunity, like you don't get this opportunity very often where you're able to outsource a staff position and save a bunch of money. So though you're asking for 4.5%, I would say that there'd be, in my mind, at least appetite for the governing board, and I haven't talked to anybody, for you to go higher than that, just to give yourself a little bit more wiggle room in case another position does make itself available or makes itself known that you need. Let's say the outsourced IT stuff ends up not working in a year or two. That way you have some space there. So you could potentially ask for 5 or 5.5% and still go down in budget, if you will.
Mhm.
But with the idea that if you're doing merit increases, they are what they are. Does that make sense to you, Rebecca?
Yes, and I appreciate that.
But whatever you feel is best is fine by me.
Yeah. I mean, like, I guess that so we just added a position as well. So this includes the creation of Kiara's position as well as filling the UX position. Kiara's position is at a lower pay grade than the IT manager position. So, I mean, yeah, like the idea that we'd be adding another position within the next year feels unlikely. And then like, then I don't have the money anymore, right? Like,
Right.
Right, it's locked up.
Yeah, Mick makes
not
a
like
good
that.
point.
Like if you
Yeah.
if you see in 2 or 3 years that this is a position you might want to create,
Mhm.
dovetailing yourself into that availability. So it's only a $20,000 increase in 2 to 3 years instead of a $60,000 increase. I mean, it's all good. Whatever you don't spend is going to go in the development fund anyway. So if you're going to, if you're
Yeah.
like, we're planning on transferring 120,000 to development fund or $160,000, it doesn't matter. As long as we,
Right.
it's there. And as long as we also know that you're not planning on giving all your staff 14% increases. Though they
Money for everyone.
deserve it,
Yes.
but, you know, yeah.
Well, sure. No, that is really helpful. I can take another look at that.
Because IT firms, they're really great the first 6 to 8 months.
Yeah.
And then you're like, we really miss having this expertise on staff and somebody who's really committed to us, not committed to, their hourly billing.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll take
Rebecca.
another look at that. That's a good tip.
I have a question. Where do you get your benchmarks in terms of what you should be paying for your positions?
We work with HR Source, and because of the unusual nature of our organization, we do a mix. We look at private, nonprofit, and library survey their salary data and average that to come up with our benchmarks. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I was wondering.
Yeah.
Because of the unique nature of y'all's jobs
Mhm.
in library
Mhm.
land, I was like, who are you benchmarking against? Because I know that can
Yeah.
be tricky.
Yeah, so we have been pretty happy working with HR Source. We do we tend to have a lot of different kind of titles in the mix for each staff member when we're looking at benchmarking, because we're really digging into the job description as opposed to like librarian 1, librarian 2. We're looking at like help desk support and you know, like staff training type stuff and building those profiles.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've worked with them several times too. And you know, I go back and forth on their recommendation, like Alex was saying, because you know, they're always like, oh, okay, well, here's the midpoint, and this is the average of what's being paid. So you don't want to bring anyone in below the midpoint, but then you're leaving half of the salary scale on the table. And so, you know, and then also they'll say things like, well, geographically, there's no pay differential. And I'm like, that's total bunk up here because the North Shore gets paid a lot more than a lot of other areas. So then I have to do a lot of legwork and find out what my fellow directors are paying for all of the things. So, so I like their work as a guideline, but I feel like some of their advice is a little in a vacuum and not real life. I know Anthony feels the same way. We've had numerous conversations about this. And I do agree with Mick that, you might want to build in a little more of a buffer. You know, you always look like a hero too, right? Like, oh, we came in under personnel costs, right? Like no one's ever going to be like, Rebecca, bad job. What are you doing? You know, but then you give yourself a little wiggle room. Like we have, I have one IT person at my library and he's my IT manager, and he does most of the work, but then we also have a contract with a company called Intiva. And Antiva used to be a different company and we liked them a lot. And then Antiva bought them and the first year was really good. And now anything that we ask them to do, they're trying to charge us extra as a project, even though we have like a certain number of billable hours built in every month. And so I'm gonna, you know, our contract is up next year and I'm totally gonna be looking to move away from them. So I agree, like they hook you and it's really sweet at first, and then they could turn Jekyll and Hyde on you, and you don't want to be trapped into that without flexibility to bring a staff position back if that's what you feel you need to do.
That is good advice. I will look at that.
For staff increases, Rebecca, what did you guys do last year? Like average?
That was it, 3.5 or 4% last year.
Thinking
I think it was
3.
4.
I could be wrong.
Oh,
4.
It was 4. And so inflation last year was what, 7?
6.5.
6.5.
Yeah.
And you remember, Beth, or anybody remember the year before that?
That was 7.
But I mean,
Oh.
increases.
Our staff increases have pretty much been around 3%. I think last year was again maybe like 4. But in
Including all the
general,
benchmarking.
they've been around 3. Mm-hmm.
And that includes all the benchmarking kind of the adjustments like you mentioned. So overall is about 3% increase.
Yeah, for staff that like didn't need a benchmark adjustment, they were at 3. But the years that we had some major adjustments, some staff took less to flex, like because they were already higher. Like Virginia is at the top of her range. So, you know, she gets a smaller increase and then a bonus annually. So it shakes out about the same though.
So are you concerned at all about being below inflation these last few years? And then you're gonna be about at a little bit. I mean, the budget line is gonna be 4%, so that's about 0.2% above inflation, which is like nothing. But
Yeah.
are you concerned that like you've been traditionally below inflation? Or are you just looking to keep it kind of even?
I I'm always torn, I think, as you are, between like stewardship of funds and like supporting and retaining staff, right? Like, I do think that our staff have very competitive pay, especially if we're comparing directly to libraries. But yes, like I I would have liked to, I think I originally proposed like a 6% increase last year, and we didn't move forward with that. So this would be a good year to do more. And so if that is something that seems palatable, that based on your understanding, governing board would be open to, I am more than happy to do a larger increase this year.
That's essentially what my argument is that you have, like, I see this as a huge opportunity that you might not get presented again. Because you've basically lost a position. You want to keep that budget up there. I'd almost argue that you should just keep it at 861 and or 860 or something like that, and say like we're going to keep it to keep the position open, and also allows you to do a not a makeup call, if you will, but a ability to properly recognize and retain strong staff. You just mentioned we're going to go through a contract renewal. We don't know what that's going to look like, and that might be really rough. And
Yeah.
I see staff wanting to say like, well, I don't want to switch to whatever new ILS because Triple-I is being jerks, and I don't want. I would like people to. I would like to have golden handcuffs on all of you, honestly, but like, and that's what I do with my staff. I never want my staff to leave for money. I want them to leave for opportunity, but never leave for money. So I would argue that I don't know what the other board members are thinking, but I would argue that this would be an opportunity for 4 or 5% increases for staff, and still be well under budget from previous years, or from what potential proposed budget. That's my 2 bits. I'll be quiet now.
It does depend. I agree with you, Mick, to an extent, but it does depend on like what your pay philosophy has been, you know, like we don't follow CPI here. We typically give like a 4 to 5% increase every year, regardless of what CPI is doing. You know, again, to try to retain competitive rates and things like that. So I don't know, being newer to the committee, you know, what your compensation philosophy has been over time. And if you mapped that out over, like, let's say the last 5 or 6 years, you know, what was the average CPI versus what your average raise was, that might be something interesting to look at and just kind of see where you've been falling. But yeah, I don't disagree that anyone working in a library doing anything should be paid more, right?
Yeah. I think this is all really helpful. I think my default is like, we have to save the money. So, I mean, you got that on your side when it comes to me doing the budget. But I do think that, you know, I appreciate the forward thinking approach of like what could happen in 18 months that we may need to adjust for. So, I mean, just looking back to kind of the major budget, you know, if we increase this line essentially and make it flat, you know, that's the $66,000 increase here. So in total, we're looking at, you know, a 2.4% budget increase, but we're also going to be splitting it amongst more libraries. So for the next meeting, I can confirm that keeping, like, I think even if we increase that personnel line back to this year's and keep it flat, I think we would not see any increase to member fees. And I can confirm that. for the next meeting.
All right, any other questions for Rebecca about the personnel? This is maybe more of a policy question, Rebecca, and I don't know if we necessarily need to get into this here, but the Illinois Paid Leave for All Act, are there any potential impacts to your staffing levels as a result of that policy and how folks need to be able to kind of flex their time to maybe not give you as much notice as you would like when they're not going to be around?
I don't think so. I mean, Beth did a deep dive into our existing policies and confirmed with the HR source attorneys that our existing leave plan is in line with paid leave for all.
Okay.
So I'm not anticipating any needed changes in that area.
Great, that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
All right, is there anything else that we need to cover on this tab?
No, and unless there are other questions, that wraps up what I have to show you today. Per my email, member fees and the development fund, we would talk about at the next meeting. So I haven't touched the development fund tab yet. So that will include looking at the potential uses for development fund, updated projections and budget for next year for the development fund, and looking at transfers from operating to development, both for this year. Again, we didn't budget for one, but I think that I think we should recommend one likely. And then next year, looking at that as well. We are still waiting on some tax data in order to complete member billing. So we should have that hopefully by next meeting as well. Beth has been on it with those treasurers. So thank you, Beth, for that. But again, with the budget kind of shaking out the way it is and the addition of new members, I think that member fees are going to look pretty similar to what they did this year.
But OCLC fees are going to probably go up.
Yeah.
What is your health insurance? Back to personnel.
Oh yeah. So we have we're on WIN insurance. So in general, we budget high for insurance just to like see what happens and change of elections. So right now, Beth, am I the only one not on our insurance?
Yeah, I was about to say,
Yeah.
our new hire has joined our insurance, and the IT manager was not on our insurance. And so right now Rebecca's.
So that's kind of a wash.
Yeah.
What is our insurance policy? Do we pay 100% for individual or?
It's
We pay
90
90% for
for individual, sorry. And then if you include spouse, children, etc., it's more like a 75-25 coverage.
So 75 for the individual and 25 for the family?
Mhm.
Is that comparable? To like we pay 100% for individual and 57% for family. So our insurance is quite a bit better.
oh.
What do you pay for family? Sorry, Mick. Is that
57%. It was an average of a lot of other libraries.
So we pay 75% of the full family coverage.
So
So
75
it's
for family. Okay.
yeah. So if you're just on individual, we pay 90% of the total premium. And then if you're on any of the other plans, we pay 75% of the total premium.
So that probably evens out. We're probably about 80% of total premium for family.
Yeah. And so
Is that
No,
something
it-
you're seeing as a problem or as a recruitment hiccup? Because, you know, again, you could conceivably take Rebecca, you don't know how to deal with golden eggs. You've been given a golden egg here, and like This is your
Yeah.
opportunity. I have a lot of expertise coming into Lake Villa Library with like, holy crap, we're transferring $1.8 million to special reserve. What do we do with that? How do we make this better for everybody? And using the money while also being mindful of the budget, you could conceivably add $20,000 to your insurance line and say, we're going to propose that we do 85% of family or 100% of individual, 75% of family, something like that. Like, is that something that you would? I'm throwing so many wrenches at you. I'm sorry, but like,
Yeah,
there's
no,
lots of
I
opportunities
don't-
here. I want you to.
Again, I don't want to turn up my nose at any opportunity to improve things for our staff. I also don't think that our benefits have ever been a deterrent to bringing folks in. Since I've been at CCS, I believe only 2 people have had coverage beyond the individual, and I believe they are both on this call, and they are me and Beth. I mean, that's you. So
Wait, what was
oh,
that?
no, no, there were 3. I was saying that most of our staff just use the
Or
individual
Just
coverage.
yeah.
But that's not, I forgot about someone else also. So yeah, I mean, like, full disclosure, I'm on my partner's insurance because their family coverage is better. So I'm happy to add more to this line and propose covering more. I think that the number of people it would benefit is not very high.
Well, you've got this $60,000, $55,000 to play with, if you will. You could add it to the salary line and just say, call it flat, or you could add $40,000 to the salary line and add $15,000 to the insurance benefits and see what that gets you. I'm just throwing ideas out for you to like for next time, and you can come back. Like, I looked at this; it doesn't make sense. It's not tenable long term. I don't know what the long term is.
Yeah,
but having like retaining strong employees it means having strong health insurance, and it bothers me that you left the health insurance because the other health insurance was better.
Well, we want to be on like we were looking at the family coverage and which family coverage is better, and like it was close.
Right, and that's good that it was close, but if we had 5% more, would it be, we want to, we don't want that to be a reason somebody decides not to stay. I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for the whole board here. I don't know where everybody else is on that.
I like what you're saying though, Mick. You're saying give the staff all the things. And I like
not to make Rebecca say things, but maybe it wasn't a cost, but it was what her partner's insurance offered. Maybe it was
like
better services or scope of whatever, and that's another discussion. And again, I don't want to get into that. I don't expect you to show us the spreadsheet that compared it, but
it was just cost. They're actually they're very similar plans. And it's funny, I do use his company as a model. They are, those companies that are like, we want to be on the Tribune's best place to work list. Like that's them. And like, they're on the list. And so when I'm always very interested in like what they're offering as benefits and what they're doing in terms of.
I'm having trouble connecting to the internet.
Yeah.
Check out the help section in your app.
I would just say that as the person who pays the most for insurance, I'm interested in this conversation, but I would say that what we do have going for us is that our insurance is with Blue Cross. As the fact that my spouse is on my insurance is because of who his employer's insurance is with. So it wasn't so much cost, it was the fact that it was Blue Cross, which was important to us. So I do think each person's situation is different, but as Mick knows, insurance costs through WIN are increasing every year. We're seeing, we're seeing that increase. So I appreciate, just from an HR standpoint, the opportunity to look at our overall benefits package and ways we can improve it. So at the very least, I think it's helpful to explore. Not for
Yeah,
my
we're gonna
personal
have-
gain, though. I'm noting that.
I mean, but it's for everyone's gain. Who knows what the
everybody's
future
gain,
may
yeah.
bring? Yes. All right, we'll talk more about this. I love that Beth is a Winboard expert now. So she and I could talk more fully about what this could potentially look like. But again, I appreciate the openness to providing more supports to staff through the budget. And I am so happy to go back and take another look and make some adjustments for review at the next meeting.
Even a 5% difference makes a big difference, that like they know that people are looking and trying to do their best for staff, that it makes a difference. I have found, at least.
I love it.
Okay, does that conclude our discussion of item 6 on the agenda?
Unless there are other questions, that's all I have.
All right, then let's move on to the fiscal accountability policy.
So Anthony, this is actually, you had suggested we put this on the agenda. I am pulling it up. We recently, so we are working with HR Source also to recruit for the new, or for the UX position vacancy. After several months, it's still vacant, and we would like it to not be vacant. So we took the contract to executive committee this month for approval, because while it is hourly, it could come in at over $5,000, which was not in our recruiting line. So after that meeting, Anthony asked if we should review my spend limit. So Anthony, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, so, and I think, one of the things that has been before the state legislature right now is increasing bid limits and whatnot, and Mick knows an awful lot about this. Thank you, Mick, for being an advocate. I'm trying to be an advocate on behalf of operations for our executive director here, and I think we can all empathize when we look at our own spending limits, that $5,000 inside of your already approved operating budget doesn't account for an awful lot, and you may need to make an operational decision that you don't want to be hamstrung by, needing to move forward with scheduling an executive board meeting in order to, advance something. There's not a lot that one can buy for $5,000 these days. My limit is 10. And for a similar size operating budget, I feel like that would be a reasonable amendment if we wish to help facilitate Rebecca's operations of CCS. I would just be curious to hear what some of y'all's folks' thoughts are about this $5,000 spend limit within the already approved operating budget.
I'm super opposed to that low of a limit. Mine is 15 here. I don't have to get any board approval unless it goes over $15,000. And mine was 5 when I came, and it hamstrung me completely. So I'm in favor of really raising that up so Rebecca can have some autonomy. I mean, if we approve the budget and she's spending it, I don't see why it can't be higher.
Yeah, if it's in the budget, I'm fine. I will say mine's 10,000, but I've never even come close to needing that. It's been more than 5 a couple times, but I'm fine with whatever the group consensus is.
Mine's 25, which, if it's over a certain amount, I always inform my board, but they don't have to vote on it. And so I imagine if the state goes up to 35, my limit will be 35. And that's because they were building a new building and the director had to make a lot of decisions quickly. And so that's not a usual sort of experience, but I've never brought it to their attention that they could lower it. So I'm totally in support. The amount, I would look to Rebecca to suggest what that amount would be without being too conservative on her own sake.
I will say that having it less than the bid amount does kind of give an extra bit of leverage and negotiating power to the directors. Like, well, I'd love to approve your $17,000 bid, but I can only approve 15. So can you bring it down a little bit? And that works.
It definitely has worked for me.
Yeah,
For
it's
that very reason.
Yeah, I've used that excuse a number of times too. And I think it also provides the board a sense of security that the director has a certain limit. But then they also have a stake in the game too, and they can get involved with it. So it's not just the director, that they've still got some control. And I think mine is either 10 or 15,000. So I think the limit for Rebecca is awfully low.
Leslie, any thoughts?
I agree, it should be raised. I'm at 8 and mine was set low because I was a new director, but I'm looking for myself to raise my own, ask my board to raise, because 5,000, 8,000 doesn't get you far.
All right, we also have this, thank you so much, everyone. We also have that clause there in the case of a bona fide emergency, the director may spend up to 10,000. So I think if we move that item in the first paragraph from 5 to whatever it is, that last line ought to be updated as well. Rebecca, do you have any suggestions or recommendation? I mean, the spend that we were talking about in this last instance at executive committee was close to 10.
7,200.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think 10,000, I can only think of one instance in the past couple of years where, I mean, like, so I think 10,000 would be perfectly reasonable. And I think that would give me the flexibility that I need. And still, I do often tell vendors like, oh, I got to go to my board for that. Like, that's a thing. And I don't hate that as an option. I honestly can still say it anyway because of other elements of policy. But I think 10,000 would be reasonable. This $5,000 amount hasn't been updated since at least 2016. And the world has changed since 2016 for sure. So.
All right. So, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And then just if that was what was decided, in the case of an emergency, would we up that to be 25,000 or the bid limit? I was also, when we send this policy to executive committee, because I'll need to approve the policy. I also was planning to, where it says CCS may spend in excess of 25,000 only after completing the formal bid process. I was going to rewrite that to just reference whatever the statutory limit is for libraries, so we don't have to change it if it changes next year.
Yes. Good idea.
So those are my suggestions.
I have a question. So I'm trying to think about this in case of a bona fide emergency, where I'm trying to think of an emergency where I think it would be more prudent for you to contact 2 members of executive committee for approval before you just spent something. Like, is there any kind of scenario you can walk through with me?
So a recent issue was that text messages just like stopped working, and that was sort of gradual and we had been kind of working on it. But if something like that happened, let's look at our pals over who are using Cersei Dynix. If you heard a few months ago, the Cersei Dynix app just like stopped working for reasons. So, if we had been on a system-wide app, do I need to spend some money to get something else spun up before we have our next board meeting? Is maybe what I would consider an emergency. At this point, the hardware that we're hosting, none of it is critical. So I wouldn't be looking to replace any major hardware. The other, I guess, sort of bona fide emergency would be if there was some sort of like ransomware, something where I needed to bring in a consulting firm. Those
Okay,
are the types of
no, I hear-
emergencies I can envision.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think the impasse I'm at is I don't see why, if it's an emergency and you automatically have a spend limit, that you would need to consult members of the executive committee before making a
Hmm.
decision to continue service. So I think that's the part more that I'm hung up on is I feel like there shouldn't be a clause in there at all calling out an emergency, because emergency or not, if you have a spend limit, you should just be able to spend it. That's how I feel.
Because it says any two members of executive committee as opposed to two specific members, I'm actually pretty comfortable with that. You know, I'm fine with ask forgiveness, not permission. But if we're talking about like, oh, this feels like an emergency to me, do you two agree that this is an emergency? I'm fine with getting, a take from two informed members of our membership before proceeding. And again, given I feel like the relative ease of access that I have to all of you, that doesn't stress me out.
Okay, yeah, it stresses me out because I would have a harder time getting a hold of two more board members.
Yeah.
And in an emergency situation, I would likely just be reaching out to my board president. So I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, like if my board president isn't available, like I'd rather just be able to then call like Joanna and Anthony as the next two officers. I feel like I have plenty of people that I can cycle through. That it would be, we're talking like minutes of delay as opposed to hours or days trying to get a hold of a specific layperson in the community.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I appreciate your faith and trust in me that I could handle it. And I agree that I could. I'm also very comfortable, again, just getting that confirmation of like, yeah, we are also concerned. Go fix the thing.
Yeah, it's more just like a calibration point for you, because I was reading it differently. I was reading it as like you might think a certain course of action is prudent, but you have to get permission from other people. And I'm not a fan of that. But calibration is always helpful.
Okay, so what I'm hearing so far is that we're in consensus about making this amendment to a couple amendments to this policy. So raising to 10,000, I believe is what Rebecca has recommended. And that the second paragraph should be amended to reference the statute and any potential future changes that may come with that statute. And that last paragraph, that spend, I think that limit probably needs to be adjusted then, correct, Rebecca? So what, 15?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking that it's a bona fide emergency, I'd refer back to the bid limit again.
The bid limit, good. Okay. And then what is the procedure for this, Rebecca? Does this go before the policy group then and then to governing board, or can we make this recommendation to governing board?
You'd make this recommendation to executive committee, and then executive committee could approve it.
Great. Do we need to take a vote as the
Yes,
Budget and
please.
Finance Committee? Okay. I don't really have a motion per se, but I'm going to move that we make the amendments that we have discussed here today to the policies, and that we advance this recommendation to the executive committee at their next meeting.
I'll second. Alex.
Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none, let's proceed with the roll call vote, Beth.
Austin,
Yes.
DiDonato,
Yes.
Dombrowski,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Jackacki,
Yes.
and Todd.
Shopping spree, yes.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, the next item on the agenda is our semi-regular CCS auditor review. There was an attachment to our agenda about our audit services. And as is our procedure, about every 5 years or so, we go out and look for proposals for audit services. And the last time that we did this was in January of 2020. And you can see the 3 that we had approached at that time. And at that time, we elected to continue on with McLaurin and Sarah. And we're up for that process again right now. I know a number of us have done audit searches recently as well, and we've got a list here.
This list is from the directors only listserv, I believe from Paul Mills. I just pulled it up yesterday, so this is not a specific to CCS list.
Got it.
And I had 2 that were not on this list that we looked at that I sent to Laura offline. One was GW and Associates, and that's who we actually went with, Dave Jalonik. And then the other one, let me pull that up. And send it to ATA, Sikich, Selden, Fox, Edler, Casella, Baker, Tilley, GW and Associates, and Whipfley. So maybe GW and Associates was the only one that I didn't. Selden, Fox.
Are you saying G as in goat or D as in dog?
It is G as in goat, GW
Okay.
and Associates.
And associates.
Okay.
I found them.
Oh.
I'll send you
went-
their contact
Okay.
information, Rebecca.
Thank
We
you.
went through one last summer as well, and we went with Illinois NFP Tax and Audit. And I didn't know if they were on the list.
They are not Illinois and
And the partner is Abdullah Khan. And I know Eder Costello was on your old list. I know they dropped out of library audits on the old list.
Okay.
And they also changed their
Okay.
name to Accession. So, and I also would not recommend them. So as a former
yeah, we did.
client, yep.
They were not one of our finalists last time were Selden,
Yeah.
Fox, and McLaurin Sarah.
Yeah.
They didn't
Yeah.
come in, so that is helpful. Yeah, I mean, this list I haven't made any modifications to that was sent out. So if there's anyone on this list that you're like, oh, I wouldn't even like, yeah, I
Don't
don't
talk
think
to
that we're a big
them.
enough. Yeah, I don't think we're a big enough client for Sikich. I don't know, but I'm happy to. I don't think we need to send the RFP to all of these.
When we did
do
Sikich,
some
Sikich came
research.
in double of everyone else in cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We also use McLaurin and Sarah, and now ATA, and we like them very well.
The trouble is if they're your auditor, you can't use them for accounting. So Lauterbach
Yeah.
and Amon and McClure
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah, we use LNA for our accounting, so.
Yeah, so I guess that's kind of part of our question. I mean, Paul has been doing our audit since 2004. We like working with Paul. He's great. I feel like he's really accessible if we have questions about best practices kind of throughout the year. should we set a goal of switching essentially for the sake of switching and to have another set of eyes on our books this year? Or like, should we include McClure and Sarah in the bid? I think last year's committee was like, you should probably stop using him. Beth, is that the impression that you took away from the last review?
From the
in
last review, yes. Mhm.
Yeah.
As I think it was at the bottom of that summary, as it was stated,
Yeah.
the comment about maybe perhaps make a switch with the next review or the minutes.
And was I the one that made that comment? I don't know if I was on.
Possibly.
I'm the one that generally that
Or
does
Jim,
that,
maybe.
especially after long term.
Yeah.
I'm kind of, and the rule of thought is if you saw that thread about it, is it's nice to have someone come in and look at how the old auditor did it. They look at different things, and so it's not just it's not just a process that you're comfortable with. You want to have it to kind of jumble up. But I think an argument could be made that because CCS is a unique organization, and it's not like, anybody on this list a library can use because they're already working with libraries. There's not a lot of CCS type organizations, unless we want to see who does Swan use for their audit, who does Pinnacle use, for their audit. And if they use a different group, then maybe we can kind of look at it that way. But if I think there is a lot to be said for staying with Paul, because whoever comes in, it's going to be a steep learning curve for them to learn. They're going to think that it's like a library, and you guys are not like a library. You are library adjacent, but you're your own, very much your own entity. And I think that learning curve would be hard. And it's just there is a learning curve for everybody when you switch auditors, like a year or two before the new process, and everybody's comfortable with it. And I know my staff kind of went crazy because they're not asking for things the same things. They're asking for different stuff, and there's a different portal that you have to upload to, and different time schedules and stuff like that. And so, well, again, I think there is benefit to changing. I think with CCS, maybe we can maybe look to change when Paul retires.
Yeah, we did find at least that Selden Fox specifically had other intergovernmental agency experience, not with the library consortium, but with a different consortium. So they were our like second choice at the last review. So I mean, I'd be happy to talk with them again. Yeah, we do have from the last review, unless it's changed, like who Swan is using. And our friends over at RSA and Prairie Cat may have some new information as they're continuing with their independence project from Rails. I'm truly not sure if they've even completed independent audits yet, but we can check in with them as well. But what I'm hearing is we should definitely still include ATA Group in our request for proposals and review their proposal along with others to help make an informed decision.
I say yes to that.
I appreciate these additional names. So we'll keep those listed.
Can I ask a question? Would there be a recommendation as to how many firms to reach out to, since we only targeted those 3 last time? Maybe 5, or doesn't really matter, like the more the better?
No, I would say max of 5 is fine. We
I'd say-
usually do 3 to 5.
We did our audit as I said, last summer. We reached out to 7 because we had heard a lot of these firms are getting booked. They can't take on any more audits. And so we got less than half of a response rates. So we got 3 out of the 7. And the other 4 just told us they were not taking on any more new clients. So that might be a reason to increase more than 3.
Were the 3 that came back for you, Leslie, were they on this list here?
Yeah, Illinois NFP and then Sickage and Lauterbach and Almond. So. But like ATI told us they weren't taking any more on.
Okay.
But again, we had also used them for a bid for accounting that they didn't receive, so I don't know if that played into it as well. And then Tiger Crest and Ord told us no, they weren't taking on, and I think Selden Fox told us they weren't taking any on. But again, that was last year. But I just would, hearing others who are in the same position, they're saying the same, that you would want to increase how many you reach out to possibly.
That's helpful. It's certainly easier to solicit more responses up front than to do a whole review and feel stuck at the end.
Committee, is there anyone on the list that you think we shouldn't be reaching out to besides ATA? Okay. Well, I guess that's up to you, Beth and Rebecca, whoever you want to,
Okay.
consider.
Okay, we'll do some research and narrow that list. Beth did a great job managing this process previously, and we have a good template in place. So we'll review and update our documents. And Beth, we didn't really talk about this, sorry to put you on the spot. Do you think you could have an update for the next meeting of?
Yeah, I started doing the math of how quickly we need to turn this around in time for our audit. So yes, if we're comfortable with just updating that existing template, we could probably have this out in the next week and be aggressive with the response time and have an update for the next meeting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because of the value of the contract, while we are doing a request for proposals, when we did it last time, didn't do the whole rigmarole through governing board. We're sending out a request for proposals, but we're not necessarily following a full-on competitive bid process involving the attorneys, etc. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay. So yes, we will continue down that path and let you know how it's going. Thank you for your feedback in this area.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that, I believe, concludes the agenda items that we have for this meeting. Our next meeting is April 15th at 1:30 p.m. Will also be via Zoom. And do we have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I move. Dombrowski.
All in favor of adjourning this meeting?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.